Today I'm going to talk about Samudghata. So when we talk about the word Samudghata is a Jain terminology. I mean, it's a Jain term which is being used in Jain texts. It comes from an ancient time, so it's an ancient concept, and the underlying theory behind Samudghata is the concept of soul and body. So the general idea we all believe is that there is a soul and the soul is in the body, right? And it's encased in the body. So the whole notion is that we are able to work only in the limits of the body. So soul is not outside the body. And when it goes outside the body, what happens? Death. The general idea is Atma gayi to mrityu and Atma andar hai to life. So this is the general notion we are going about, but then against this notion there is another theory, which is that the soul can leave the body but partially and then return back. So it's I mean, the modern terminology for this is astral travel, out of body experience, near death experience. Is type of terminology. We are finding these kind of terminologies being prevalent in modern times, and modern psychology also does a lot of research on these kind of concepts. And people feel that they are outside the body, seeing their body, flying in the air, things like that. So here, though we would not use the word out of the body experience, or I mean it is out of body experience, but the difference when we talk about, when psychologists and other modern people are talking about this theory, what is the underlying philosophy behind it? And what is the philosophy behind when underlying philosophy when Jains talk about it? So that's very different, I think. The theory that there is a soul and then the soul is traveling outside, because if there is someone traveling outside, if there is an out of body experience, who is that which is going outside the body? And so if you answer the question, who is going outside the body, and if we say the soul is going outside the body, then you believe in the soul. So, and you believe that the soul is within the body and soul is different from the body. But when we talk about many many philosophies, there are different kinds of philosophies. For example, monism is one theory. Well, Brahma, right? Bhagwan hai, Brahma is there. In Hinduism, that's one Brahma, and Brahma is everything. So Brahma is, table is Brahma, I am Brahma, body is Brahma, everything is Brahma. So if I am Brahma and everything is Brahma, there is nothing like me and the other. But when we say out of body experience, there is something which is going outside something else, isn't it? So the underlying philosophy behind all these different terminologies being used would be very different. So in my session, I would be discussing basically about Jainism, as what Jainism has behind, has the concept of why the concept of Samudghata is important for Jainism, and what does it mean to be out of body experience. So the first, let's go look into the word Samudghata. So there are three pieces in this term: Sam, Ud, and Ghat. So Ghat is actually root word. I mean, where it's there are two meanings of Ghat. Ghat means destruction. Ghat means movement. So when we talk about out of body experience, it's in general it would be like moving out. The soul is traveling. So the sense of traveling is one meaning in there. But the other key meaning is destruction, which means when the soul travels outside the body, there is a destruction of karma. So both the meanings are implied, and as we explore, we will see that why one meaning is more important than the other at some point. But the whole idea is that the soul travels outside and there is a destruction of karma. So in a way, this is a mechanism to destroy karma, basically. We have different ways of doing destruction of karma, isn't it? You do tapasya, you do swadhyaya, you do jap, all sorts of things. But this is a unique way of destruction of karma. But again, it's there are two types of samudghata, let me put it this way. So one is done by a keval jnani, and then the other one is done by a lay person. So like people who are not enlightened yet. It could be sadhu sadhi, it could be animals, it could be human beings, it could be devta, it could be anyone. So the one of the key dichotomy or differences is that an enlightened person does samudghat and a non-enlightened person does samudghat. So when a person is enlightened, what does it mean? They've got all knowledge, right? Complete knowledge. Moniya karma is gone, Jnanavani karma is gone, Darshanavani is gone, and Antara is gone. So 4 karmas are no more there. So only karma which is remaining is Nam karma, Vedni karma, Gotra karma and Aishya karma. So when only these 4 karmas are left, do they really need to make big effort to for their any further growth? Because the moment we say that someone is Keval Jnani, we understand them as fully spiritually awakened, isn't it? I mean, there isn't any more anything else which is needed to grow in spirituality for them. Especially, I mean, they are still there as a human form because life hai, age jab khatam ho jayega, when their life completes, then they would go to nirvana. So in a way, spiritually oriented, they have nothing to, I mean, no task remaining basically in a way. But yet they would do samudghat. Now again, whether they do it or it happens, it's a debate. But what happens in this is the soul, when has to liberate. So for example, the time for liberation is, for example, 12 o'clock, let's take a good time. And if one has to liberate at 12, and then the karma remaining is Nam, Gotra, Aisha and Vedaniya. So if the Aisha karma is to expire by 12, which means death should happen, moksha, liberation should happen by 12, then the remaining karma, if they are more than, they are in more bulk, which could not be finished off within that short duration, then the soul expands to shed the remaining karma, the 3 karma, Vedaniya, Nam, Gotra, to balance it with the Aisha karma. And so they expand into the universe, and the expansion is in nanoseconds. It just happens, even if you've blinked it once, they might have done it 3 times, for example. They need more than, that. So it just takes 8 nano moments to expand into the whole universe and become, this is the only moment when the soul can become the size of the universe. And then the soul returns back, and then it's time for liberation. So this is done by a Kevali just to balance their karma. And this is where the destruction of the karma becomes very crucial or very important for the liberating soul. Because in Jainism, can you get rid of karma by exchanging karmas? You cannot exchange karmas. You cannot give and gift karmas. But if you do, like sometimes people do pujas and stuff in the name of someone, right? What is that? That happens or no?
Yes.
So what does that mean?
I mean,
Remembrance.
Remembrance, yes. And anything else?
That's the common understanding.
So, as Jains, we don't believe that you're giving or exchanging punya to someone or taking. I mean, if you're doing puja for them, they are getting the punya of what you're doing. Is not Jain theory in its underlying philosophy. I mean, we might have different ways we talk about it, right? If you do something good for the temple, the whole family gets the benefit and all that stuff. But the core philosophy is you get what you do, basically. I mean, it's not like spirituality cannot be shared in the way we share like books. You can help someone become spiritual by motivating them, by doing with them, by helping them when they do it or stuff like that. But it's not like something you do it and you give them a check that okay, you enjoy the benefit of it. That's not happening. So when a Keval Jnani is about to has to liberate, they cannot give away the karma to someone else. The other important thing is they cannot expand their life. In Jainism, there is two kind of lifespan actually. One which could be expedited, which means you could complete the early death, can happen, Sopakram, Nirupakram. And then there is another life which you cannot change it. So if it is it's fixed. So people like us might go through some early death. Some people have like accident and early death, or something happens and someone dies. So it's not always the death need not always happen in the exact time it was planned. Because of some circumstances, death can come early, but it cannot be pushed further. So the limit cannot go beyond what's been decided, but it could be expedited, it could happen early. But on the contrary, there are souls like the Charam Shariri who is going to liberate, or the Tirthankars and special people, their lifespan is fixed, like Devtas. You cannot move their lifespan early or delay it. It's just going to be the time it was fixed. So for the person who is going to liberate in this life is not changeable. You have to go through that time, and there is no moving forward, no coming before. So even in that context, suppose we say, okay, we could balance the karma by extending our life. But in Buddhism, Buddha could do it actually. In Buddhism, it says that Buddha could expand his life by 1 kalpa. So there is a one fixed duration. He says that I could expand this life to this degree. And of course, after that, he has to die. So in Buddhism, there is a belief that he told this to Anand. Anand was one of his disciples, that I could I could expand my life, So he said it once, he said it twice, he said it thrice. And he expected that if Anand told him that, okay, do expand your life, he would have expanded it. But then Anand did not propose him to expand his life, and he did not do it. But the belief is there that he could expand his life to some degree. But in Jainism, yes.
I'm confused between death and liberation. Are they separate, or are they connected?
Okay. Very good question. So basically, the last death is liberation. So we die, we are born, we are dying, we are born, we are dying, we are born. The last death, when a person actively leaves the body, we would not usually call it death. We would call it liberation, nirvana, moksha. I mean, it is of course death in the general sense that the soul leaves the body completely, but we would not just say Mahan, like if there's a guru who's passed off, we would not say unki mrityu ho gayi. We would say Mahaparyan ho gaya, or something like that. There's with respect, we have a different word for them. So
it applies to ordinary people.
But the key theory is the last death is liberation.
That's the ultimate.
Yes. So basically
There's no
death.
rebirth.
Yes.
There's
So
no
that death which doesn't bring in more rebirth is liberation. Yeah.
That's liberation.
Yeah.
So, is there a name for the earlier cycle, death?
That is sansar, right? Janam Maran, we say that. So Mrityu and Janma is going on. So that goes
So
on.
when you said liberation is the last in the life cycle.
So yes, basically see in Buddhism there is a different theory again, that we are not talking about Buddha. Buddha is not considered to be, he's said to have come back to this world to help others liberate. So it's another big different approach. But the whole idea is for Jainism, neither we could change the lifespan, neither we could share our karma. We have to deal with our own karmas, and then you need a way to balance your karma, because there is no way out. And how do you do that? So it's kind of having a justice to your theory of karma, where if you do it, you get to go through your karmic baggage, and for this, the Kevali actually has a projection. The soul expands into the whole universe, sheds the karma, balances it, comes back, and then goes for liberation. So this is one key Samudghat, which is positive, which is good, which is for the benefit of liberation, and Baya Kevali, which is again enlightened soul. And there are other types of Samudghat which is being done, which is not for moksha, which is not for your soul in a way. It's just for fun. It could be for fun. It could be for enjoying something. It could be using powers. So there are different kinds of them which we will explore eventually. So it's talking about the two meanings which is there in the Samudghat, which is expansion and shedding of karma. So in context of Kevali Samudghat, we know that the whole idea is, emphasis is to shed the karma. I mean, there is an expansion to the degree where the soul is touching the whole universe. But the purpose is to shed the karma, basically. But in the other projections, it could be that, okay, if I like to visit India and not able to go, I would just do an astral travel to India, do whatever I need to do it, or I like to do it, I would come back. Or for example, Simandar Swami, right? Mahavidya Kshetra, there is Tirthankar. We want to visit them and we want to have their darshan, go do the darshan of Simandar Swami, the Tirthankar, the living Tirthankar, and have the blessings of him and come back. So there are different reasons one could go out, and there is different mechanisms for projecting out. But the whole idea is there is a projection and there is a returning back. There is a projection to do some task and then there is a returning back. Yeah.
Does the soul leave totally, or the part of it still remains?
Part of it. So basically, if the soul leaves totally, then it's dead. But it is only partial expansion or partial projection of the soul units, basically. Yeah. Yes.
Who can do out of body experience?
Who can have this? So as I mentioned, there are two types, right? One is Kevali, enlightened beings could do it, and the other one is which could be done by any other beings. So for example, the Kevali Samudghat could be only undertaken by a Kevali. So for example, we say, okay, he does it Bhagwan does it to balance their karma, but we are not liberating in this life. So what? Even we could do it and shed our karma, isn't it? So the idea of this kind of idea is not mentioned in the texts, basically, that a person could do it to delete their karma. The mention is about if someone has labdhis, they could do it. Labdhis by birth, power by penance. So for example, Devta, they could do this out of body projection because they have those abilities by birth. Or even hell beings, Narakiji, so even they could do it because they have the capacity by birth, but humans and animals could acquire. So sadhu, or any lay person, they do penance and they get some special powers. So those who have the power could do it, basically, yeah.
So it's only those people who have special powers can do it.
Yes, so again there is two things in this. There are some projections which Samudghat, which just happens, it's not been done. And then there are others which is being undertaken, which is done by effort. So those done by effort, you need that power. Those which just happens is because of the karmic pressure, and you will understand that as we discuss the types, basically. Yes, sir.
So Mandami, the first premises for Kevali Samudghat is that with movement there is destruction of karmas. But if you look at it in a sort of general sense, if you have general movement, then there is actually binding of karma. And actually, when if you look at Vanditu Sutra, there's Dig Vrat and Anuvrats and all this saying curtail your side's movement. So what is that concept which says that when you have this out of body experience, when you're actually moving out, there's so why aren't you accumulating karma, and why is that associated with destruction of karma? So when the soul goes out.
Okay, a very good question. So basically in our ancient scriptures there's a theory called Kriya theory. So Kriya means action, in general terms we mean action, and there are different, so it's an old concept basically. Now when we talk about these philosophies, it's very modern, it's more polished and sophisticated. So the early theory is like there are different kinds of actions, so there are 5 types of them. And depending on how much of violence is being incurred, they would say, okay, did you get engaged into 3 kriyas or 4 kriyas or 5 kriyas? So when texts like Pannavana and other texts talk about Samudghata, they talk about how many kriyas is one involved in. So for example, if one is a person who is projecting out, so that person is engaged into 5 kriya, which means that because of the expansion, there is a possibility of violence of subtle beings or other beings around. So for example, if this is one person and then this is hitting this one, in because it's projected out, so it's reaching and it is touching or it is hurting this. And so for example, if this is another this thing, and if this actually expands, one expands, and in the process of expansion it is reaching to someone else and it is hurting, touching that, this, which is a target of this one, will also be engaged into violence because of its actions, it is hurting someone else. You see the subtleness? Okay, so one soul and one person or one being, and this is another person, right? So this is the person who is actually projected out. I mean, their body is here, but the soul travels, and as it travels, in the way you actually reach or touch many souls, right? Because there are many souls around. So in that process, when you touch the other soul, even that soul actually might engage in some action because there is a movement. You put a pressure on them, and that, so it's not only this soul getting violence, but even the other soul who became a target of this one also is engaged into violence. Yes.
So it's not a physical action, it's a mental.
No, it is a physical action because it's not about mind. It is about the soul traveling out. It is invisible, of course.
The soul harming the other soul.
It's possible because that's the reason we keep this peace, right? Why do we keep this peace? Because the air which moves out is hurting the microbes around us. So I'll give you more very subtle examples. Even they say that when we walk around a pond and our shadow falls on the water of the pond, the shadow, the impact of, because these are very delicate beings, the water, the plants are very delicate, and the shadow of a person could actually hurt the pond beings. But again, we have our own limited capacity to control our violence. I mean, our effort, right? I mean, it's very subtle, basically. For example, when we touch one fruit, it is actually having pain in 18 different types or 18 different. So since they're very delicate, they're more prone to being hurt very quickly. So.
So,
Yeah.
Nami, so that actually counteracts your own argument. So that
So,
means in
okay,
the process.
you got this idea, at
Yeah.
least, right? So when we talk about this Kriya theory, the description is all about only projections by unenlightened beings, not by an enlightened being. So any unenlightened being who is not yet a Kevali, who does this action would engage into violence. This is very clear. And that is the reason why the idea of Samudghata is not being promoted as, okay, you should do it. It's not been, I mean, it's not kind of, I mean, it's such a funny, it's a funful thing, isn't it, to go, travel, come back, even travel to Tirthankar Bhagwan and come back, but it's not promoted. So, but in context of Kevali, this whole question is not raised. So there are few things what we need to understand is, one, the action of the Kevali is very disciplined action. Even when they walk, so even while walking, even though you're very cautious of walking, right, but there are subtle beings around and you cannot control your placing your leg, and the problem is Kevali can see everything, right? They can see the subtle beings as well. But yet, if the subtlest control of body and control of thing is not possible. I mean, if there is a violence, it could happen basically in a way. But they are not a part of it. Why? Because they don't do it with awareness of doing it. They're not doing it for doing it, right? I mean, it just happens because you really cannot control. So in context of controlling, there is another, I'm sorry I'm bringing up stuff, but it's another theory that suppose a Kevli keeps a foot in one place. Now if we ask him, because he's able to see everything, right? Kevli can see everything, so can he replace his foot in the same place, in the same space units which he had done it earlier? And he cannot do it. Why? Because everything is so subtle, and to have a control over that subtle control to work, to be able to function in the subtle world is not easy, basically. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yes, so I'm struggling with the word Kevli. Is it equivalent to awareness?
No, Kevli actually means a person who is enlightened, who has got rid of Monia karma and Gyanavarni karma, Darshanavarni karma and Antray karma, which means they have reached to the 13th gunasthan, which means only the leftover is 14th gunasthan for them, and then just to liberate.
No, this okay, but in context of movement, while you are
They
hurting
have-
someone,
Yeah, they have that knowledge, so they can again see the same space units, they can see their body, but the control of, the subtle control of matter is not possible. Okay, let me not go into complications,
Yeah.
like, yeah. It's all about controlling matter. Body is a matter,
yeah.
right? And the space is space, but there is matter around the space as well.
Yeah.
So basically the control of the subtleness of the matter is beyond one's own scope. But anyway, so what I was trying to say is this, that even when the Kevli does move around, if there is any violence which happens, the Kevli is not violent. The only karmic bondage which the Kevli undergoes is Samprai, I mean it's Niryapatik Bandh, because it is, so the karma comes and it's something like this. You take a sand, throw on the wall, it doesn't stick on the wall, it just falls off. So all the actions which a Kevli does, the karma is coming, but it only stays on the wall, like it sticks, touches the wall and falls off. Imagine even this thing, like, Bhagwan is doing the sermon, he's giving such a big discourse, he's enlightening so many people are liberating by his talk, so many people are learning by him, so many are getting awareness and purification, all that stuff, but still as a soul he is not, generally we say, okay, you do this and you get punya, right? But there in context of Kevli, there is everything he's doing, he's taking karma only to shed it off at that next moment. So he's not really engaging into deep interaction of piling up karma or piling up bank balance for his future. There's nothing of that. It's just happening, the whole process is happening. So in context of this, we understand that the only kind of bondage they go through is this subtle, just coming and going karma. So even when they do Kevli Samudghata, it is, there's no karmic bondage involved. Now there are arguments and understanding of this question, because the question is crucial, isn't it? Why, when others go out, if it is hurting, why isn't it the case with them? One of the concepts is that they don't do it, it just happens, right? And it makes sense, because the karma is now about to process its final processing, because it's time to liberate. So when in the karmic record there is imbalance, it automatically, actually there is a process called avarjikaran which happens before this. It's a subtle process, and when that happens, the soul would know that whether there is imbalance or there is no imbalance, and if there is imbalance, then there is a projection. So one of the key idea is this: it's just projection happens, they're not doing it, and if then it's just happening because of the karmic pressure, then they're not responsible for the karmic anything of that. But then the counter question is that if it is just happening, it's a Kevli, right? Kevli, there is nothing unknown to the Kevli, there is nothing without the awareness of the Kevli. So to say that it just happens, still they know what's happening. So the other reason why we say that it could be the case that it just happens because it happens in nanoseconds. And in general, we cannot perform action without innumerable seconds. We at least need some innumerable seconds to process any action. But if it is happening in the most subtlest unit of time, it's beyond one's own capacity or control of self-willed action, it should just happen. So there are reasons why we would say that yes, it's just happening, it's not by effort. Yeah.
The result of any action can be very gross, or it can be very, very subtle.
Yes.
I mean, even any awareness cannot recognize that you have heard something or...
No, they are recognizing it, it's just they cannot control it.
Ah, okay.
See, there is a difference. Okay, I know what's happening, but I cannot change that happening, I cannot stop that
It's
happening.
beyond...
Yeah, I cannot control those material movements which is happening there, it's because it's very subtle. So, yeah.
There is a question which is quite wide.
Mm-hmm.
The question in my mind is, we have been told that in Europe, infinite souls were liberated.
Yeah.
Therefore, the question in my mind is, Jainism is a very developed, detailed philosophy
Yeah.
and practice. And surely there are other ways by which people are getting liberated.
Yes.
And therefore, is it a concept of anekanta here? Is it like this is just one way and there are other ways as well?
Okay, so now basically the whole Kevali Samudghata comes into play only when the liberation is already decided. So one goes through bhakti, one goes through swad meditation, the other one tries to read scriptures. So there are different ways of spirituality, right? And the ultimatum for us to grow in spirituality is attain enlightenment. So to attain enlightenment, there are different ways, which could be any spiritual path you can pick. You could pick just reciting, doing the chanting. You could do reading. You could do so. When we talk about different ways, it is in this context we say that there are different ways of liberation. But when one has attained Keval Gyan, which means that the spiritual epitome is when you've reached the highest peak of spirituality, because you're enlightened, you're purest in your knowledge, you're purest in your state. So now what happens is the problem which is only a problem of Jains. Why I say this is because in Jainism we have this 8 karma theory. There are 4 karmas which you have got rid of. There is lifespan remaining, and there are 3 karmas which you have to still take care of. So to balance this karma, you have to go through this Keval Gyan, Kevali Samudghata process. But in other traditions, for example, Buddhism or Hinduism, that's the reason I mentioned, like for example in Hinduism, there would be, okay, God would come and say, okay, I bless you and you liberate. Done. I mean, you don't have to do anything. There is this...
No, but I'm talking about reality. Because we have been told that there are infinite souls, and we believe that there are infinite souls in liberation. Yeah? So there must, in reality, not just in concept.
No,
reality.
we are talking about reality. Yes, every tradition there could be a possibility of liberation. Every tradition there are souls who have liberated. This is also we believe because we talk about Tirtha Siddh and Atirtha Siddh. So those mechanisms are there to reach the highest point of spirituality. What we are talking of diverse methods, and it's a practically approved concept that no matter which tradition one believes in, if the path is non-violent, the method is non-violent, then the soul could go for liberation. So when we are talking about this whole idea of Kevali Samudghata, it is that problem which is there only after one has attained the highest state of spirituality, which is having attained Keval Gyan. So, because when we talk about devotion or swadhyaya or any other means, you don't need anything of this once you attain Keval Gyan because you have done your task. The only thing remaining is you still live in this world because your lifespan is remaining. And for example, Bhagwan Mahavir attained Kevalgyan at the age of 42, and he lived until 72. So the rest of these years he lived because he had that lifespan remaining and he had to just live it. And as he was living, he helped other people to liberate. So for him there is nothing to walk or nothing to be accomplished anymore. Death would happen when the time is going to come, basically. I mean, that's the moment when he's going to die, or that's the moment when he's going to liberate. We call it different ways, but that's the whole point. So when we're talking about Kevali Samudghata, we are not talking about accomplishing spiritual goal. It is about once they have accomplished it, still, that's the whole thing I think is the different in Jainism, is that we talk about karma which is still remaining after Kevalgyan, after having accomplished spiritual goal. But in other traditions, it need not be the case. And this different types of karma is also only a Jain theory. That you still have to go through pain rendering karma, or the Nam Gotra is actually called karma of the body. For example, we have the body, so there is a Nam karma. So there is a status, so people kind of appreciate you that you are in a. So all those appreciation and all the Gotra and the royalness or appreciation which goes around person and person's voice or person's discourse and all that stuff is still remaining. But so what is remaining is all related to the world.
So in a way what we are saying is, if you believe something, that will happen. Therefore, if you are believing in Jainism, then it becomes a reality. Like in quantum mechanics, if you see something, you have particle theory, wave theory.
So by saying this, actually what happens, I mean, there are two understanding of what you're saying, if I understand it right. So one is, if you believe in Jainism, what is said in Jainism will happen to you.
Right.
And if you believe in Islamic tradition, what is mentioned in Islamic tradition will happen to you. You say
it
that?
becomes a reality for you and for your soul.
Yes, basically, see, when we talk about Anikant, we have to be very cautious. Because, for example, in Islamic tradition, I don't know, if in Islamic tradition we talk about, if there is a mention of jihad, right? So then the jihad theory is right for them, because they've understood it that way. So when we talk about Anikant, it's not about considering everyone and anyone as right. It's about what fits into the parameter of non-violence or the true spirituality, that could be taken as right. You get the problem, right? Because that was one of the things that Anikant is also Anikantik. Anikant could also have, I mean, if you say Anikant, this is I mean, if you say that by Anikant you're able to prove that there is light and darkness in this room, so you could also prove something negative. I mean, Anikant is actually a lens. You could use the lens to see the both sides. Or you could use the lens, I mean, it's like a knife, right? Knife could be used for good and bad purpose. Anikant could be used for good and bad purpose. So as Jains, we have this theory of Anikant used to depict reality, to avoid conflicts. When we say a person who has devotion in Allah and is meditating on Allah, he is doing it, his meditation, it's not wrong in the sense that he is in his meditative state. So we would approve that as spirituality, but when we say if someone goes and blasts themselves and that is their religion and that should be okay, that would not be the case. You see, that's, so we would, in Jainism we use Anikant to avoid, to accept the positive things around in different traditions. But that doesn't mean all traditions which they have all different things to say is all good. I mean, we would not approve of that. That becomes a bigger problem, I think.
But you don't also disapprove at the same time.
Sorry?
You don't disapprove the other side as well. If you apply Anakanpa, you look at everything sort of
So
from a central point of view.
It's a, do you, I mean, see, say
Very
that.
difficult question you asked.
It's not about. See, the whole idea is you cannot claim false statements as true by anikant.
Yes.
Because if you're doing that, you're using it unwisely. Anikant is a tool, it's a glass, it's a lens. I mean, you could use a magnifying lens to see something, right? And you could use that magnifying lens in different ways. You could use a knife for different reasons. A surgeon uses it for surgery, to heal the problem. But someone could use it negatively. So anikant could be used different ways. But when we talk about the Jain approach, the whole effort or initiative was to understand what is right and which is in harmony with you in other traditions. So, for example, when I gave this example of Allah or a Buddha, when one is in devotion and deep meditation, whether they are meditating on Allah or Buddha or Jinnah, it doesn't matter as long as their inner state is pure and growing. You see the whole point? So where there we are not making a push or a claim that no, that they should be having a Jinnah face in front of them. So that claim we are getting back. I mean, we are not denying that. So that's our Jain non-violent way to embrace everyone. But then we would not say that the jihad is also right. We would have our limits of what is right and what are wrong in our perspective. Yeah.
One time when you talked about Kevali Samudghata, you mentioned that it's very nanoseconds, and you gave it's like could be 8. Is that just a way of example, or is it actually specified?
No, it's exactly the 8 nanoseconds. So basically there is a process which
8 samay. So the actual word is
yes, 8 samay. So we will talk about the process probably in my next session, how the soul expands and how it comes back. But the idea is it's so subtle and so quick, it's happening that it just happens within seconds. Yeah.
Sorry, we got digressed to
Anikant.
Coming back to Mahavira, in his last 30 years, though he had achieved Keval Gyan, there was a movement
Yes.
which could bind the karmas.
So that the karma is actually because all his action is for blessing all souls to liberate, right? The whole initiative is let everyone awaken, let everyone move forward towards the path of liberation. So his action is all shubh-yog, or his action is positive, auspicious action, isn't it? So he's binding punya, but then what kind of punya is it? The karma comes, it touches the soul, it sheds. It's not like accumulating punya which people are doing by constructing temples and other stuff. It's more like...
So he could acquire karmas, but can easily shed instantly.
That is the actual mechanism which happens for them because of their enlightened state. Any karma which they bind or which is binding for them, it would be just an instantaneous coming and going karma. It wouldn't be long-lasting karmas
The
actually.
sword has lost its glue.
Yes, exactly. Well
So
said.
it hasn't got the glue.
No glue. तो
So
glue
has
चाहिए
got
कि
the-
नहीं चाहिए? हाँ?
नहीं चाहिए.
नहीं चाहिए. बट अभी तो सब पकड़ के रखे
तो
हैं.
आ रहा है जा रहा है ना, ग्लू की क्या जरूरत है?
अभी तो ग्लू तो बहुत है. एक्चुअली अभी कोई आ रहा है जा रहा है, रूम में भी कोई आ रहा है जा रहा है तो अभी डिस्टर्ब हो जाता है, लाइफ में भी कोई आ रहा जा रहा है तो डिस्टर्ब हो जाते हैं. तो there is lot of coming and going on, but so the whole idea is at the level of karma, try to not have to have less glue, so you bind less karma. Even in context of us, I mean, whether we are not kevali, even if we are not kevali, we might do things with detachment, and that is where you are actually being smart. Because with detachment, you are not bind the karma which comes. It comes, but it stays. It's with less intensity, so it just goes off quickly. So the more intense the emotions, that's the actually underlying theory. The more intense the glue, the more intense the emotions, the more stronger the bondage, the more lasting the bondage. And if it is less attachment, less glue, the duration is short, the intensity is short, the consequence is short in a way.
तो selfish बोलते हैं और हम सब
साधु बन
बहुत
जाओ.
बहुत hard हो गए, selfish हो गए, selfish हो गए.
See, that is their approach of socially they want you, so then that is social perspective, if you're moving away from the social thing, then they say, oh, but each one would have their own views. We would call them materialistic, you would call them selfish. So views to chalenge, but if you have an understanding of spirituality and you have brought that awareness in your life, go with that awareness. भगवान महावीर ने गौतम स्वामी को बहुत बार बोला उत्थेनो पमाये, which is very simple. If you're awakened, why do you go back to sleep again? So if you've got that awareness, you've understood spirituality, you've brought that detachment to some degree, don't fall back. Try to stick to it and move forward. So it's not easy, I mean, because there are occasions we lose our temper, or we get into the trap of good or bad emotions. It could be both the ways. It could be attachment, it could be anger or anxiety or other stuff. So that comes, that comes and that goes. But make sure that they don't live longer in your house. Right? That's the whole point, yeah.
The way I understand it, the more aware you are of your action, you can easily get detached.
That's true. Awareness is a big tool of spirituality. Even for example, I am restless, but I'm aware of my restlessness. I'm aware of what's happening. I'm aware of my anger. Yes, so that awareness actually brings a shift in ourselves, and where it helps us get out of the trap much faster. Again, we have to work for it, but awareness does help a lot. And the other thing I think is also important is, are we more clear about our goal? Right? We are aware of our emotions, we are aware of our circumstances, we are aware of everything, but are we clear that what is my ultimate goal? Do we think that, do we live with that idea that liberation is my ultimate goal? Actually, that doesn't happen. I think that's one of the big problems in our lives, that we know liberation is our goal, we want to grow, we have a passion for it, but somehow we don't live every moment for that goal. We live for exploring about the goal, we live for educating ourselves. It's something like this, right? When a person has to become the doctor, he goes through a whole medical school, but then finally what's important? His residency and his experience, right? He has to train himself to do that. And what we actually lose is that residency period. We learn all 14 purva we pad liya hai. We might go through all scriptures, but to train ourselves towards that thinking, towards that philosophy is crucial. And to go by that passion and that goal, that doesn't happen. So I think if we are able to bring that awareness, that what is the state of me in the current moment and what is my goal, the two awareness actually, the awareness of the goal and awareness of the moment, that has accomplished. I think the journey is always, it should be progressive to some degree, yeah.
Can I ask one question going back to the concept of
I did not do it,
and that was meditation. Is meditation a process by which your soul is traveling?
So very good point you made, and the problem which I see in the scriptures is that the scriptures mention about Kevali Samudghata, which is a meditative state. To reach the whole cosmos and come back, it cannot happen without meditation. And any person who uses labdhi and other stuff, there should be some kind of concentration to use powers. But I met few people and they say that by meditation they are able to project out for two reasons I've heard. I've got, so one of them mentioned that they would do or guide meditation to reach the Tirthankar, the Simandar Swami. So in meditation, one would guide someone to go to Simandar Swami, have the darshan and come back.
You said that earlier, isn't it? In the talk, getting connected with.
So it's not like mental only. This is another problem, I think, that in these kind of cases, you really don't know whether it's really a mental happening or a physical happening. Like when I was talking to some students long back, many students actually claimed or said that they had this outer body experience. They would say, some would say in dream they went out and they came back. Some would do some meditation and have that practice and have experience. But which of these practices are really a mental construction and which of them really happening? If it is labdhi and you're going and doing something, you're executing a task, then we understand that you did something, you moved the book from here to there, so you know that this happened, which means I went and came back. But in the meditative cases, we are not actually doing something big somewhere, it's just going and coming back. So in these cases, to know whether it is a real happening or just a cognitive mental construction, it's hard to distinguish which basically. But yes, in meditation there are people who do such kind of meditation to go out and come back. Yeah.
Just
Final question for today.
fine.
Yeah.
Just it's interconnected. Earlier we talked about out of body experience.
Mm-hmm.
Now in this case it's different
Yes.
situation.
It's the
But
same. Mm-hmm.
my earlier thought was, why does it normally happen at the point of crisis? You are in a hospital bed or operating theatre. Only then we hear about these cases.
The answer to this is actually there in my when we talk about the list. But I will give you a brief of this. That I mentioned two kinds, right? Those by attempt and those self effort and without self effort. So those which happens without any effort, which just spontaneously happens, they need to be they can only happen if there is an intense pressure. So intense pressure of karma, intense pressure of pain, intense pressure of emotion. So when you say crisis is needed, it's because you need that intensity for pressure for the soul to leave out. So we'll talk about the types, and there is a projection which is called pain projection, where the projection happens because of pain, and emotion projection, where the projection happens because of emotion. We'll talk that in my future session. Yeah, good point. So yeah, if you have any other questions, you can just write it down, bring it with you, so we could have more discussion on this. Because otherwise, it's going to be a more technical thing. But if you have questions, we could go and diverge into an and then come back to our topic.
If we restrict to one aspect of it every week.
Yeah. So what I'm going to actually planning. I'll pick each one as I move forward. So the next. In the 7 list, there are 7 types of them mentioned. So there is Vedniya Samudghata and Kashaya Samudghata. So probably I might go on to these 2 in my next session, and then we can follow up with the next ones. Yeah.
What we would like, Mandan, is we enjoy really the question and answer. We actually understand a lot more from the question and answers. So maybe the lecture bit can be, this is just my view, lecture bit can be a smaller bit, but the question and answer can be a bigger bit.
Yes, and I prefer even that. So what I would actually suggest is come up with your question as they pop up. You don't wait for me to finish at the end.
No,
the reason,
No, you should explain everything.
I think so. That's
and
better.
Then, otherwise
your topic will get digressed.
I'm lost. When
okay,
you're
so
speaking,
we'll go for
I
questions.
didn't
I mean,
understand.
I'll go for my
So we
own.
leave
Yes.
about
We-
20
we-
minutes for question
Yes,
and answer.
and then
Okay.
answer question.
Okay,
You
so
can't be answering
we'll
question.
have enough time for the question answer, and we could take it at the end.
Yes,
That's good. Yeah.
that is more constructive.
I think in short is a question of changing your